Hi everyone, I'm Molly Kingsley, and this is the next episode in what will hopefully be a new series of exposés that Us For Them are going to be running about wrongdoing during the pandemic. And just to give you a bit of background on this, so as many of you will know, Us For Them has been one of the most active campaign groups since the start of the pandemic. We campaigned against nearly all, if not all, of the damaging, harmful interventions of the pandemic period. More recently, we've campaigned for free speech. We've campaigned against the expansionist and authoritarian ambitions of the World Health Organization. And alongside our public campaigning work, often we have used strategic litigation, either on the scenes, sometimes behind the scenes. And of course, with that, there has been a lot of very meticulous, painstaking legal research. I'm a lawyer, others on the team are also lawyers. And I can't sleep at night under the weight of what we have discovered that, for whatever reason, has not made it into mainstream press. And really, the core purpose of this series is to tell you a little bit about what we have learned, in the hope that it can reset the public conversation that we're now having about this. Because it's not fair to say, is it, that there's been no discussion of lockdown harms. There has, and certainly among some segments of the press, certainly the right-leaning segment of the press, there is now an acknowledgement that lockdown was an absolutely ruinous decision that has set our children back, the economy back, the healthcare back. But I think what's really striking when we see public discussion on this is it's still, even to the extent it's being accepted as a mistake, it's still called that, a mistake. Mistakes were made, or it was all a bit ludicrous. And we wouldn't do that again. Like, there's been no real meaningful discussion of some of what we believe is really serious culpability. And actually, it was very interesting in that context to see last week Dominic Cummings, of all people, tweeted it was about goings on in the US. It was about the origins of the lab leak theory. But what he said in his tweet was that he believed that Fauci was, of course, the chief medical advisor during the pandemic in the US. Cummings called for Fauci and his network, and I'm quoting here, to be rolled up and retired en masse, with some jailed. Now, that seemed like an astonishing statement from the former chief political advisor to Boris Johnson. But he's absolutely right. And in our view, the kind of discussion we need to be having about culpability goes far beyond simply the US. It goes far beyond simply the suppression, which is now. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of the kind of transgression that we believe evidences a different order of culpability from mere mistake. So, first, unethical decision making. So how many of you knew that the Central Westminster government actually had an expert ethics committee during the pandemic, and that it fired, or at least appears to have fired, that committee when the committee started giving negative advice about the rollout of COVID passports and about the rollout of the COVID vaccine to children? Second, conflicts. So many of you will be aware of the seismic March 2020 Imperial College London projections paper. That paper predicted a staggering number, upwards of 500,000 deaths in the UK from COVID, and it advised prolonged, very stringent interventions aimed at virus suppression. It said, and I'm quoting here, this type of intensive intervention package, or something equivalently effective at reducing transmission, will need to be maintained until a vaccine becomes available, potentially 18 months or more. It was an incredibly important paper. It set the tone, really, not just for the UK pandemic response, but for the entire global lockdown response. Well, how many of you knew that in the period leading to the publication of that paper, Imperial College London had actually received funding of upwards of 100 million US dollars from private interests intimately connected to the pharmaceutical industry, and that just after publication of that paper, it took a further £22.5 million from the UK government for vaccine research and development. And when the government used that paper to justify blanket nationwide lockdowns, I don't believe those potential conflicts were disclosed to the public, nor do we believe, as far as we can see, they were disclosed ever to parliamentarians. Final example for now, recklessness. So one of the things that was flushed out as a result of one of our legal actions was information about what the government did and didn't do or know at the time it masked school children. So you will all no doubt remember the masking class mandate. We believe it was a mandate. I know others may not agree with that terminology, but there you go. But at the time that mandate was rolled out, it turns out that actually the UK government had not done any harm assessment, and what's more, that they failed to do any harm assessment for a staggering 17 months afterwards. I don't think these are mere mistakes, and I do not think they are things that we can just dismiss and pretend never happened. In fact, I think that to do that is grossly offensive to the people who have been hurt by these actions. And really, these are just a few examples of the kind of topic we're going to be delving into in these sessions. Another one, I'm not going to talk about it today, but we'll come back a lot to it, is censorship. So as many of you may know, UsForThem were debanked in 2022 by PayPal, and last year it also came to light that for really the entirety of the pandemic we were monitored, i.e. spied on, by the UK government's counter disinformation unit. As you'd expect, we have a lot more to say about that, and actually we've been working quite hard behind the scenes on that, and hopefully we'll have some breaking news for you on that front in a week or two. I know you guys are still very concerned about a lot of these subjects. We see, obviously, the comments on our social media feeds when we post about this, and we absolutely and wholeheartedly agree. Like, everyone seems to want to move on from the pandemic. Of course they do, because most of them are complicit to some level or another. We don't, and we won't. Like, it is inconceivable to us that we're going to leave a society to our children that glosses over and pretends these type of really serious wrongdoings just never happened. So I do hope you'll find these sessions interesting. We're going to try and make them as referenced, as meticulously footnoted as humanly possible. We'll be showing for some of them footnote references at the end of the session, sometimes during. And yeah, please do listen to them, and if you find them interesting and worthwhile, share them. A teaser for the next session, we're going to be doing a session on missing mortality and vaccine harm data, which, is as serious as it sounds. So thank you, everyone, and hopefully see you soon.